Hello everybody, it's Foxy speaking, and welcome to another episode of Foxy's Fun Inspirational Chats. And today I will be your host. And in this episode, this is an episode about a young man who had just completed his apprenticeship. The apprenticeship he undertook was a carpentry apprenticeship. And because he'd completed his apprenticeship, though he was obviously paid with the job apprenticeship, because it was an apprenticeship job, which is what he started with before going on to the full-on job itself, he and his colleagues decided to go out and celebrate. Why they decided to go out and celebrate was because this young man did such a good job with getting through and accomplishing his apprenticeship. All of the colleagues were impressed, and certainly was his manager by all people, including his colleagues too. This young man's name was Terence England. He and his colleagues, who really felt like who were really like best friends to him since they took him under his wing a great deal whilst he was doing the apprenticeship, included his newfound colleagues, like people like Rose, a nice lovely lady who's very lovingly protective of Terence himself, and his other two good friends alongside Rose included Dara, an Irishman, an Irish immigrant who'd lived in the United Kingdom for a long time, but worked as but is also a fellow carpentry colleague of Terence, Dara, and Clifford. So Dara and Clifford and Rose were his three good friends who he worked with. There were other colleagues, but they weren't in his work group. So because Terence had gotten through his apprenticeship extremely well, and how impressed his colleagues were with how he got through it, they decided to go out and celebrate. They found a nice little pub within their local area, which they thought was the perfect spot to have a nice little drink out and all that. This, Terence, Rose said, is the pub I sometimes go out to. Of course, little young Terence, Dara said, this is a great pub to go out to. We'll have a good few pints and all that. Just don't get too drunk, otherwise you'll be smashed if you're not careful. Dara was a nice man, but he had a sense of humour in one way or another. And just make sure you don't get hooked up with too many naughty idiots. Clifford said. Clifford was funny, and Clifford was a Scouser. Well, I've been to many pubs before, you three, Terence said, but not to worry, I won't get hooked up or acquainted with anybody who's bad. I never get acquainted with people who are bad, or at least try not to. Terence was normally very careful with how he weighed in risk, but obviously his friends, but knowing how protective his colleagues were of him, particularly Rose, but in the most lovingly protective way possible, he knew it was important to follow their very advice. They entered the pub, and once they got to the counter, they walked up to the counter and ordered their drinks. Terence had a Prosecco. As he liked his Prosecco, Dara and Clifford had a pint of Amstel beer, but Rose, on the other hand, had half a pint of cider, as she described herself as a cider girl. And so the four people enjoyed their drinks at the pub. As they were enjoying their drink, Terence looked all around and he became enthralled with the pub itself. To him it looked like a friendly, kindly environment. Obviously, he soon forgot about the advice his friends would give him. But before long, everybody, as they were about to sip, everyone was about to sip their drinks again, Dana said, "Here's to Terence, everybody, for getting through his apprenticeship and getting it completed, and all the hard work and effort he puts in. Let's give a toast to Terence. Here's to Terence," everybody said as they raised their glasses towards him in celebratory honorary for him getting through his apprenticeship so extremely well. Terence raised his glass of Prosecco, and he thanked everybody profusely for their kindly wishes towards him, and so they drank to it. And so, before long, Terence had completed his drink. He drank a little bit more quickly than everybody else, but fortunately it did not make him drunk. But as he'd finished off his drink, his glass of Prosecco, he decided to, as Rose, Dana and Clifford got engrossed in a conversation together, they didn't notice Terence sneakily walk away from them. They didn't notice as he walked away, as he walked up to the counter to get himself another drink. Yes, what would you like, sir?" the bartender asked as they came up to young Terence. "Oh, can I now opt for a pint of bitter, please, with some orange in it?" "Bitter with orange? Certainly, sir. Which glass?" the bartender said. "Give it a good old-fashioned tankard glass, please," Terence said. "Good old-fashioned tankard? Right you are, my lad," the bartender said. "There you go, sir." After he filled up his beer, he was like, "There you are, sir," and served it over to Terence. Terence held the handle of the tankard beer, gave it a little sip, and decided to walk around the pub, observing it with his own very eyes, whilst holding his tankard glass with him. He was curious with the designs of the pub. But little did he realise that as he was walking away past the bar, it was at least see-through to see people walking around, and it was Clifford who looked around only to see him wander off. Terence is wandering around the pub. I just hope he doesn't get into anything silly or naughty. Right, let's go after him," Rose said, and so Rose got up from the seat, and the lovely lady, the very lovingly protective but nice lovely lady, began to walk around the pub to find him. Terence had already gone up the stairs, and as he went up the stairs, looking around at all the old-fashioned designs of the pub itself, he saw lots of people having good conversations and chats. It wasn't the people he was paying attention to, it was all the old-fashioned designs of the pub that captured his interest and caught his very attention. And so, as he looked around the pub itself, he took another sip at his bitter beer, and after he took another sip at his bitter beer, Terence began looking around the pub itself. But it wasn't long until a group said, "Are you alright, mate?" Terence looked towards where the voice came from, and there were a group of 4 middle-aged, overweight men enjoying their pints of beer. All middle-aged men dressed up in suit jackets, shirts, and grey-coloured trousers and brogues. "Alright, nice to see you," Yes, sir. Nice to see you, young lad. The patron said as he raised his pint glass towards Terence. Terence just smiled and raised his pint glass towards the man and took another sip. Don't think we'd seen you around here before, had we? The other patron said as a part of the group. You know. Oh, it's my first time going to this pub, Terence said. We're celebrating. I'm with a few friends, but they're not with me at the moment. I thought I'd sneak away from them. I like this, young lad, said one of the patrons, part of one of the groups. He sneaked away from his friends, you know. Tell me, lad, are your friends really protective of you? The patron asked. Well, one of the middle-aged men asked. They are protective of me. One's extremely protective of me, my colleague Rose. But she loves me all the same. You know, because I'm younger than them all, you see. You know. But it wasn't too long, as Terence and the four middle-aged men were laughing away, it wasn't all that long before Rose began stealthily walked up the stairs and began walking behind Terence before his very eyes. Rose decided to walk up carefully so that she wasn't trying to intrude on anything. She slowly walked carefully towards Terence, but she didn't want to drag him away from the conversation he was having with the middle-aged men. So, in her most lovingly protective way, she wrapped her arm around Terence's shoulder and began to give him a little cuddle to try and capture his attention, holding his arm. Terence looked towards who was wrapping his arm round his shoulder, and it was Rose. Oh gosh, it's one of my colleagues, Terence said as he pointed his finger towards Rose when talking to the middle-aged man he was talking to. Is this your friend who's so protective of you? Asked one of the men. Oh gosh, don't be too overprotective. He's old enough to know his way around the pub, you know. He could talk to us, you know. and all the four middle-aged men laughed and took another sip at their beers. Thank you, men, Rose said, but I know he's old enough to go to a pub on his own, but he's younger than me, and I'm very protective of him. He knows that I love him, and that I'm protective of him only for his own safety, you know. Not just because of his own safety, but also because I love him as his friend, as his good friend, since he's a good worker in my field of work, she explained to the men, and trying to capture Terence's attention. She said, Terence, please come back with us, please. We were a little bit worried about you wandering off from us. I'm sorry, Rose, Terence said. His face fell and he felt rather bad for sneaking away from his friends. Rose smiled at him. She gave him a little cuddle, although Terence didn't give in to embracing Rose with the cuddle, since he was holding a pint glass in one of his hands. And so, with his pint glass in his right hand, Rose could see Terence's left hand in one way or another, and so with his left hand she held his left hand with his right hand, and then they walked back over to their table. They got back to their table. Dada and Clifford were relieved to see that Terence was okay. Where were you, lad? Dad had asked. We did get a little worried about you, so please try not to wander off too much. Terence smiled. Dada, I was okay. I am sorry I sneaked away from all of you, but I just wanted to observe the pub. You know, I hadn't meant to get caught in a conversation with the other patrons Rose caught me having a conversant laugh with. But I am sorry I worried you, and shall we continue with the celebrations? But before we continue, but before we continue now, Terence, please don't wander off from us again unless you need to go to the toilet. We're very protective of you, as Rose would say. Oh yes. As Terence knew what it meant when Rose was going to say something, so he put his pint glass down on the table, and Rose, giving him a cuddle as a means to protectively keep him safe, she said, "We wouldn't want for you to be hurt, Terence." I mean, as she was holding on to Terence, embracing him, she said, I don't mean to sound overprotective of you, but I'm very protective of you as a friend, but you're almost like a son to me in one way or another, since you're quite a lot younger than me. But all we want for you is to be safe. Terence eventually gave in to embracing Rose with the hug. He knew that Rose wasn't trying to be obsessively protective of him. He knew she was only being lovingly protective of him just for his own safety. What I love about you, Rose, Terence said as he gave in with embracing Rose with a nice big hug. I love that you're so protective of people in the most loving way possible. Rose just smiled and continued with the hugging embrace towards Terence, and eventually gave him a nice affectionate kiss on his cheek, and then gently let him go with the hugging embrace, and they respectfully sat back down on their seats. The four people continued with their drinks, and once their celebration was over, it was time for them to go home to enjoy their weekend, as it was Friday night. Terence, Rose, Dada and Clifford walked out of the pub, and obviously walked with Terence to the train station as he needed to get his train back home. The moment they got back to the train station, Rose, Dada and Clifford said their goodbyes to Terence. All three of them individually gave Terence a hug and a handshake as they exchanged their goodbyes to him. Terence exchanged his goodbyes to everybody and walked into the station. Terence couldn't have been a happier young man. He felt like he'd achieved many useful things in his life, from getting through his carpentry apprenticeship and making some good friends in his line of work. Very good friends, to the point where they took him out to the pub for a drink out in celebration of him reaching his achievements. I do feel lucky in many ways, Terence said to himself. I didn't think in all my lifetime that I'd have a colleague, if not three work colleagues, who'd become like best friends to me, who protectively look out for me. I didn't expect any of this, but I'm happy it's happened to me. He couldn't be a more happy and more thankful young man regarding the friends he's got and his line of work he works in. The end. Thanks everybody, all indeed for watching. Yes, it's been a long time yet again since I did a fun Inspirational Chats episode. But I thought this story would be worth the wait. You know, at least I've not only done a woeful one episode this month. It's been a woeful 2, but I'm almost certainly going to do more than 2 come August 2024 for certain, you know. But I'd like to base some of Terence, the character Terence, who's a carpenter, his 3 friends, Dara and Clifford, they're just made up. But one of the characters, Rose, lovely Rose, she's based on a newfound friend of mine. Oh gosh, how to say this without embarrassment. I sort of based Terence's friend Rose on my lovingly protective newfound friend Lisa Perch. I mean, and I love Lisa dearly, I really do. No, really, I love her very dearly, as a close friend, that is. Despite having only known Lisa for a good about 5-6 months, I couldn't help but end up learning to love her. I mean, really, I really couldn't help but end up learning to love Lisa Perch herself. I mean, I must say, to tell everybody odd things, you know. And I remembered, I'm trying to think what it was I said when Lisa was on a live of mine in the comments section. When I saw her in the comments section, I did say, was it our friend Lisa, who we all love and look up to, something like that, or did I say, oh, I do love you, Lisa, I really do. And then she said to me, what she said to me was, I love you too, Foxy, and I'm very protective of you. She did say that to me, and I was like, I wasn't like, protective? It wasn't like, oh, she's protective? Oh dear, who have you befriended? No, 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 please, no. It was not like that. It's not what you think. No, no, she's not painfully protective. No, no, I mean, really, she's not. She's lovingly protective, is how I describe Lisa Perch herself. In the same way how Rose is lovingly protective of Terence himself. I mean, Rose, you could say that Rose, the character, is lovingly protective of Terence in either the same or comparable way to how Lisa Perch herself is lovingly protective towards myself, Graham, Fiona, Trevor, and other people she closely admires and follows, and as well as all her friends she'd made within Graham, Fiona, and Trevor's community, or other communities and all the rest of things, you know, to tell oneself odd things. But, you know, I just couldn't help but base this lovely Rose on my lovely friend Lisa. I mean, I really couldn't, but I did it. I did it. I just hope it's not too much of an embarrassment to Lisa, because I would never want to embarrass my wonderful, lovingly protective friend Lisa. I really wouldn't. For the world I wouldn't want to embarrass her, I mean that. Thanks everybody indeed for watching. Please let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I shall certainly see you in the very next video. Ta-ta, another time. Goodbye, and may your good wishes be bringing you great expectations of happiness.